Hi and welcome. In this recording, I want to talk about all the planets in astrology and to give a brief overview or spend a couple of minutes discussing each planet and what it means in astrology. So I could go on and on about this. There's so much that can be considered when it comes to each of the planets and the sun and the moon, but I want to give some kind of overview of some of the main points or some of the main points of what they symbolize, I guess. So the sun in astrology is the part of us that people can see when they know our birthday. So we can figure out someone's sun sign from their birthday instantly. So despite this, I kind of find the sun a little bit hard to describe, to kind of really get to the core or the bottom of what it is at times. But the sun, from my understanding, is it's kind of like what we project or what we are in the world. It's what we want. It's kind of what we're doing in the world. So it's the part of us, that people can know from our birthday. So it's very kind of instant in a way. Probably different from the rising sign, which is also instant, but the sun is instant in a different way. It's like, the sun is the ruler of Leo, and it wants to shine. It wants to have an identity. It wants to have a specific identity. So we kind of identify in some way with our sun. And I won't be talking about aspects in this recording, but when it comes to aspects, the aspects can actually uh, modify the sun and each of these other uh, planets that I'm going to be and points that I'm going to be talking about. So, if you have sun in an aspect with Neptune, for example, which I will discuss later, the identity is going to be more Neptunian. You'll still have your sun sign identity, but uh, it's going to have more Neptunian flavor because everything in astrology is connected. It's like uh, you can potentially look at every part of a chart as kind of like in relation to something else. So, if you don't relate to your sun sign, for example, it might be because it has some kind of aspect to Neptune, just as an example. But let's not go too deep into that for now. So that's the sun. It's kind of like what we project, what we are, kind of like the whole of our being. It's how we want to express ourselves and how we do express ourselves in the world, how we want to shine, and so on. So let's talk about the moon. So the moon is like the inner child, it's like the inner emotional world of each person. So it's what we nurture in our own space, it's our reactions to things. So, very much to do with how we react emotionally to things, to situations. It has to do with our relationship with our mother and sometimes other female figures in our lives, but particularly the mother. Has to do a lot with sort of the beginnings of life. Uh, so when we were, growing up, our childhood, how our relationship with our mother was. The sun has to do with the father, and Saturn can have to do with the father as well, but the moon has to do with the mother more so. So the moon is reflecting our moon sign is reflecting to us what kind of emotional flavor we have most of the time, or what our baseline emotional world is like. And this can differ quite significantly depending on the moon sign that you have. So it's like our inner private self that we know about. Other people may not know the depths of this very well because this is our own feeling of like, what am I on the inside? Um, so that's the moon. Mercury has to do with our everyday interactions, our communication, our processing of information, the way we take in information, the way we like to share information, so the way we like to communicate. So Mercury governs also short distance travel. So all this kind of movement of ideas, of people, of goods, kind of in the in our vicinity, like how we interact day to day, how we interact with the people around me in my environment, and how I think and how I communicate. And it's all this mental cerebral processes, how we take in information, how we share information, how we process information. It's all to do with data. Mercurial people can be very intellectual. If you've got Mercury in the first house, it can be very obviously an intellectual person. So that's Mercury. Venus is the part of us that really enjoys pleasure. It's the pleasure side of us, and also has to do with relationships, social relationships, friendships, social mingling, romantic relationships, love, beauty. It has a lot to do with what we find attractive, how we like to draw people to us, how we like to be attractive to others, what makes us attractive. It even can have to do with fashion, clothes, how we do our hair. Those are Venusian. That's the Venusian realm. Those are Venusian things. Venus also has to do with kind of the growth of something beautiful, the beginning points of something growing in a beautiful way. Kind of like we're starting something beautiful with Venus, and Venus also has a lot to do with what we find enjoyable and how we can tap into a sense of pleasure and enjoyment in our lives. So some Venus signs, if an Earth signs, if you have an Earth sign as your Venus sign, you can find more pleasure than other people, maybe in sort of earthly pleasures. Other people may be more emotional with their enjoyment. So water signs, for example, so Venus has a lot to do with what we find attractive, what we find pleasurable, and it's the pleasure principle of our lives, and it's everything that brings enjoyment. And we can go overboard with Venus as well. So all these planets have different levels and there's different ways of interpreting it. So there's so much more that I could say, but I'm just kind of giving an overview. But so it can have more negative expressions, more positive expressions, but it's that kind of a pleasure principle, and what we find attractive, how we want to be attractive to others, how we beautify our home, how we want to look, how we want to beautify ourselves. Things like that are Venusian. And also Venus has a lot to do with finances as well. That's the other side. So, finances can bring us beautiful things for ourselves, for our home, gifts. It's all part of the same picture. So let's talk about Mars. Mars is, if Venus is feminine, Mars is masculine. So Mars is a lot to do with our energy, how we want to go after things, how we want to assert ourselves. So Mars in Aries, for example, is in its own sign. So it's tends to create a part. There's a part of a person in that person that's very energetic, assertive, can be aggressive. So whatever way Mars is expressed in signs, it differs. So it's Mars. The Mars sign has a lot to do with how our energy is mainly expressed, how our assertive, physical, so-called masculine energy is expressed. So how we put our energy into things. Are we very assertive? Are we more passive? It's how is the energy, the masculine energy in us being expressed. That's Mars. So it's how we go after what we want, and it can have to do with, in certain aspects, for example, it can have to do with fighting or arguing. For example, Mercury Mars aspects can have to do with arguing. So it's like how we're trying to get something or how we're trying to bring something somewhere. It's like how we're trying to get something out of us or get something to us. So it's like, how am I going to assert myself and my will to get what I want or to get what the group wants? For example, Mars in Aquarius can be very or in the 11th house can be very assertive when it comes to the group. So trying to get something for the group, or trying to putting a lot of effort into getting things for the group. But let's talk about Jupiter. So Jupiter is often called expansive, and so it really wants to amplify and bring some kind of positivity and optimism and hope, and big picture thinking to whatever it's associated with in a chart. So it wants to elevate and amplify. It's sort of like, I like to think of it as like the part of us that we need when we're starting a project, for example, and we need to have hope that it's going to work out. So Jupiter is the side of us that helps us make the big plans and have a bigger picture of what needs to be done, and to have faith in our plan. So Jupiter has a lot to do with faith as well, and optimism, and can be have to do with religion. So faith, religion, philosophy as well, anything higher mind things. So also philosophy and foreign countries, and how our attitude is when it comes to like foreign lands and foreign travel, and like the curiosity of what's beyond what I know, the curiosity of like what's out there, what's far away. So it's not interested in details so much. It's more about like the bigger picture. So when we get really excited about a plan, for example, or a project that we're doing, like we may lose touch with the little details because we're just getting so excited and kind of worked up in a positive way about like what we're going to be doing, and oh, this is going to work out great, and I have so much optimism and faith about this project, and this is gonna change our lives. That's Jupiter. So it's the part of us that we need when we need to have a little hope and optimism in bringing a project forward or creating a project, and having like a bigger picture view of what the project is and how we can expand things. So when it comes to transits, Jupiter can be a planet. I mean, it is a planet that is associated with like the expansion of something, or the elevation of something, or even the exaggeration of something. So it's elevating and exaggerating the part of the chart that it's coming into contact with. So it's to do with very much like um, it wants to make everything bigger and brighter and better, but it can also exaggerate and lose touch with the details, which is more the realm of Saturn. So Saturn is the part of us that is more grounded, the part of us that wants rules and structure, and it's a lot to do with it's sort of like the father figure, and has a lot to do with karma. So you reap what you sow, and Saturn is the part of us that like is gonna work hard, and you don't no gain without pain, and you don't get something without making the necessary effort. So that's what Saturn is trying to remind us. Like when Saturn transits come along, for example, Saturn wants to give us rewards, or give us like to kind of remind us that, look, you didn't do this properly, or you need to work harder in this area. So if you've worked hard, it can give you rewards. If you haven't worked hard, if there's something that you've overlooked, the Saturn transits can be painful, but ultimately it's for your own good, kind of, and it's for the good of society eventually. So Saturn is the part of us that is more serious. It's a part of us that many people might be scared of, or it's the planet that many people might be scared of. Saturn transit's approaching, for example, but it's all part of the bigger picture, and it's part of the rules of like how astrology works. Like we can't have Jupiter without Saturn, we can't have Saturn without Jupiter, and things like that. So we need those rules and structures sometimes to kind of to build upon our foundation. And that's what Saturn really represents. So it can be quite serious. It's not terribly interested in having fun, like Venus, for example, or Jupiter. But Saturn is the part of us that is going to work hard and is going to, um, build something. That's what Saturn is. Uranus wants to break free from structures or to get insights about how the structure can be changed, transformed into something else. So Uranus is very revolutionary. People who are very Uranian can be very eccentric, rebellious, unexpected, quirky. Just it's about changing something, changing the status quo, or changing how things are quote unquote supposed to be. So Saturn brings the structure and Saturn brings the rules, and Uranus kind of wants to. Uranus is also quite structured, but it's kind of it wants to change the structure. And depending on the kind of aspects that you have in your natal chart, for example, with Uranus, it can be rebellious in the best way, or it can be just erratic and just unexpected in the worst ways, or in a challenging way. Put it that way. I don't want to say best or worst, but it can be challenging. For example, squares with Uranus can be very challenging because you're constantly looking for the newness, maybe rebelling against the old or rebelling against what is known and what is expected. But for example, a trine with Uranus can be just very beautiful in that um, you have uh, been able to build something, and you're maybe highly original, for example, and it's causing less problems because it's a trine. But uh, whatever Uranus is doing in a natal chart, it has to do with the part of us that likes newness and originality and just new structures. And let's break apart this structure and create something new. And it's very intuitive and very unexpected. So it's this kind of intuitive insights about something um, that can bring us forward in changing things. So we need to have an insight about how things can be changed before we go and change the structure. Neptune is the part of us that is more dissolved, or it's kind of it's not as structured. So it's the sensitivities, it's the psychic realm, it's the ocean. It's states that where we get into when we're not sober, for example, and it can be just not to do with just it can be to do with alcohol, for example, states of um, intoxication, or it can be states of just the beauty that we feel, for example, when we listen to a beautiful song. Like it's those realms that we go into that we can't see or touch or maybe even explain with words, but it's those sides of us that want to escape. And it can be a very beautiful escapism, or I don't want to call it escapism, but it can be a very beautiful like artistic or musical experience that has to do with Neptune, or it can be self-delusion or just delusion in general. So Neptune kind of have to do with um, losing touch with what is necessary, or losing touch with what is important, or you know I don't want to say losing touch with reality, but it can kind of lead us astray at times, because Neptune has so much to do with the states that we're in when we're not grounded. It's a more magical side of the world is Neptune. So I would consider even like theater or film to do with Neptune. So anything that is not as concrete, like they're imagining, let's say in a movie, they can. It's bringing you into a fantasy. Same with theater. If it's a fictional kind of a movie, for example, it's bringing you into a fantasy for uh, for beauty and for certain feelings that we want to experience. So it's enhancing. I like to use that word for Neptune as well. It's like it's enhancing the experience that we have on the Earth. That's Neptune. Anything that enhances or brings us to another realm. Finally, I want to talk about Pluto. So Pluto is the dark, psychological, deep parts of our psychology. So anything that Pluto unearths is going to be like unearthed from the deepest part of our psyche. So it can be destructive or constructive. It's very kind of deep, dark energy. Um, Plutonic people can be very psychologically in tune or psychologically strong or powerful in some ways. So Pluto has a lot to do with power of our like self control and power, and transformation is a good Pluto word. Pluto has a lot to do with transformation. So Pluto is the part of the chart that wants to throw away what is no longer necessary and completely just no mercy, just kind of throw it away, and you can build something new and you can transform. And you can come into, with Pluto, you can also come into a lot of psychological challenges or psychological insights through those challenges. So it has a lot to do with the underworld, or the darker parts of the human experience and the darker parts of the psyche. So Pluto is, it's very kind of unseen things coming to the fore. It's associated with the eighth house as well, which can be like the unseen stuff that we may not want to deal with or face. But Pluto is, it's doing its thing, and it's going to show us those things eventually. So I hope that makes sense. And there's more that I could say, like I said, and there's other things that I could talk about here, but I just wanted to give some kind of overview of uh, these planets. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope it was informative. So if you like this recording, please leave a thumbs up, and thank you.